Okay, so what we're talking about behavior. So in our bigger category of behavior, we've got our two main categories that behavior analysis deals with. We're not physiologists, so we're not dealing with physiological systems or neurological systems or respiratory systems. We're talking about all just operants and respondents. So the operants we're pretty savvy with. And of course, those are the voluntary behaviors, the things that we've learned to do based on our ABCs, based on responding to environments by choices. And then the other side, the respondents, are the other category. And the respondents then are what we refer to as reflexes. So to understand a reflex, we have to understand the two components, the two concepts that make up the concept of reflex. So we're going to be talking about conceptual analysis of behavior, because we're talking about these concepts and behavior. We're going to be talking about a concept is the label that we're talking about, and then the construct is basically the definition. And what we do when we look at words and try to come up with meaning in the psycholinguistics field, they're talking about concepts and constructs, and the construct, which is the explanation for what that concept means, is constructed, which means made up or designed, developed, in order to explain the concept. So with concept formation, we're trying to figure out what it is and what it isn't. So we got terms for, we're talking about reinforcement as a concept has certain must-have elements in that definition. Reinforcement has three particular things with reinforcement, for example, as a concept. Reinforcement has to meet these three criteria to qualify as the concept of reinforcement. It has to follow behavior. It has to be contingent on a response, and it has to either maintain or increase behavior. So we know those are the three properties. Then as you read test, exam, questions, etc., you're going to read a story, and you're going to hear something where you see a story, Johnny's dad gave him $10 to mow the lawn, and Johnny didn't mow the lawn. So why didn't reinforcement work? You say, well, because it violated the concept of reinforcement. It did not follow behavior. It was not contingent on behavior. He gave it to him before the lawn was mowed. He didn't give it to him contingent on mowing. So it came before, it wasn't contingent, and he didn't maintain or do more behavior. So it failed all three categories. With a reflex, we have two must-have elements in a concept. A reflex has two components, and what a reflex has to have is a stimulus. It has to have a response. Reflexes are involuntary. So there's not a choice in the matter. So we've been, and this is what's often referred to as stimulus response psychology, is the language in the field of respondents, of reflexes. Now, the basic reflex has the stimulus and response, and so we talk about an unconditioned stimulus that, I'm going to make an arrow, elicits an unconditional response. So these are basically due to our phylogeny, our phylogenetic, our inherited genetic characteristics. We have our body biology, our DNA, our bodies are made up of all the biological elements, and certain stimuli will elicit, they will provoke, they will cause a certain response. So cold air will cause goosebumps. Hot air will make you sweat. A loud noise will startle you, but startle is not a behavior. So what happens is when there's a loud noise, a loud stimulus, auditory stimulus, and sometimes you have dependent on what else is making that noise, you might even feel the force of it. You might feel some vibrations. But the noise, because noise is sound, of course, is the vibration of air molecules. So the loud noise, the sound, will set off a response, and that response, which we might see as being startled. Some people might say they were frightened or scared or anxious. What we have to do is the actual response, and what that is physiologically, these are reflexes, these are body reflexes, is that was increased heart rate. It made your heart speed up, made your chest muscles get tight, made your throat get dry, maybe your face got flushed. So physiological responses are always set off by some kind of unconditioned stimulus. The unconditioned responses are, this is no learning, this is just a natural reflex. You make up a reflex. Now, reflexes are all problems. Reflexes are feelings. They are the physical feelings of our body. It's like sense receptors. When we sense and feel things, we feel the temperature change. We know the basic visual receptors to see and to hear and to touch and to taste. And tactile is to touch. And then we have tons of other receptors. We have vestibular sensory systems and proprioceptive receptive systems. We have countless receptors in our body. So we're going to focus in particularly on the aspects of respondents as reflexes to the body, to the environment. And this is just the basic formula. Again, we use the word elicit specifically in behavior analysis to mean it provoked it, it caused it. This is when we talk about an actual cause-effect relationship, that this cold air will at some point cause goosebumps. Hot air will at some point cause sweating. So these are things that the absence of food makes your stomach start to grind, or whatever the stomach does in the digestive system, and you start feeling hunger pains. We call them hunger pains, but they're pains from the lack of food. It's just lack of deprivation of food. So with respect to feelings, this is where a lot of the issues become psychology and behavior analysis. We're going to look at these feelings as behaviors because they are body behaviors. Again, they're unlearned, they're genetically programmed, they're related pretty much to survival, the biology of the organism. They've had some functional effect on the body because without these, we didn't have these receptors, we wouldn't probably survive and pass those genes on. So that's one type of behavior. And the opposite, of course, is what we've learned to do that are voluntarily learned behaviors. So now we talk about question, comment?
Yeah. So an unconditioned response and a reflex, those are two different,
Well,
right?
an unconditional response is in order. So the concept of reflex is something that happens reflexively. It's response to the environment. So it's environmental stimuli will elicit the response. So a reflex
Mm.
is a concept, and the construct, the definition is when an environmental stimulus sets off a body response. So an unconditional response is the response is a respondent. This is a respondent behavior. This is a response. It's a behavior. This is a respondent behavior. Where do we get respondent behaviors? We get them from stimuli. So these two make up a reflex. So this is why you hear them used together, and you're asking the right question because we're trying to separate. What do we mean by a reflex? Well, reflex is a body behavior that involves something set it off, and the actual response was the goosebumps, feeling like. So, that's the feeling. That's what your body is feeling. We talk about feeling
Okay.
frightened, scared, or anxious, and what we're feeling is heart rate, chest muscles. We're feeling physiological things in the body. What's happened is we've given those labels and names. We've created concepts for those feelings. And we teach kids to identify your feelings. You're hungry, you're tired, are you bored? Um, are you feeling frightened? Are you feeling scared? Are you feeling anxious? And we've given those psychological labels to emotions. So mostly psychology talks about these as emotions. And Skinner referred to this as these as emotional behaviors because these are what we feel. And those feelings give emotional labels. So emotional behavior involves these feelings. We know from the science of behavior that all of these feelings are, we call them respondent behaviors. They're behaviors of the body. And we all have them. So when people get upset and frightened and scared and have those emotional reactions to situations, that's a reflex. That's naturally built into the body. So that's how we treat them. So we've been criticized as a field that behavior analysts don't believe in feelings and emotions. We don't believe that choice. Well, yeah, stimulus response psychology is, you're not going to have a choice. Gets cold enough, your body will produce goosebumps. That's a responsive behavior. A loud noise will startle you and frighten you and scare you and make you anxious. But those aren't behaviors. Those are labels for emotional states. So we're going to look at these. These are the behaviors of our body, and they're natural. And they're basically programmed in our genetics as part of our phylogeny of the species, and these are related to survival values of the organism. And we'll talk mostly with humans, but we've got subhumans, have a lot of subhumans. The animals that we've done research with have the same basic sense receptors. They just don't get the label. Make a loud noise and a dog jumps, they say, oh, he was startled. He was frightened. Well, an auditory stimulus, something, or fast movement, like with a horse, a real fast movement by a horse's eye will startle them. So something environment sets off a behavior, a response, and if it's natural, unlearned, unconditioned, this is just programmed in that organism. That was a reflex. And that was a feeling, and we give them labels. So this is why when people say, well, my child has a lot of anxiety, this is the danger of labeling this as a locus of control. He doesn't do that because he's anxious. He doesn't do that because he's angry. What he's feeling are these feelings. We've given them labels, but anxiety does not cause behaviors. We know from what we've got with ours, we've got antecedent conditions before behavior. So cold air is an antecedent condition. If you walk outside, it's really cold, you get reflexive response. So there was an antecedent unconditioned stimulus. It wasn't an MO, it wasn't an SD. MOs and SDs are for operants, and unconditioned stimuli and conditioned stimuli are for respondents. So we're going to look at these behaviors and look at them as we got reflexive behaviors, we've got operant behaviors. If I'm feeling cold, I have learned to put on a sweater. If I'm feeling cold, I've learned to get a blanket and turn on the furnace. If I'm hot, I've learned to turn on the fan. If I'm outside and it's hot, I may learn to go stand in the shade. All those were learned responses to my physiological feelings. And a ton of what we do, because we are always feeling and sensing something in the environment, this is where the UMOs come in. And I can't name them without looking them up. I'm trying to memorize them, but I haven't memorized them. The Jack Michael lists the 9 basic human UMOs, the unconditioned motivating operations, which starts with being like, if you're food deprived, it'll motivate you to do things. Pain is a motive. Pain is an unconditioned situation, a stimulus condition that causes you pain will motivate you. That's an unconditioned motivating operation. That's a physiological one because they're unconditioned. These are, again, unconditioned responses due to stimuli that occur and set them off. So that's just understanding those are respondent behaviors. We talk about respondents. We're talking about reflexive behaviors of the body. Now, they very much affect what we do. They do function as UMOs. They do motivate us to do things. Like I said, if you're cold, you put on a sweater. So when we're breaking these out and looking at how does this affect our behaviors, we then see that in the environment, we have a lot of stimuli that are basically neutral, that don't really have any effect on a response. And because we understand conditioning, the pairing of stimuli with different things, in this case, stimulus-stimulus pairing. So stimulus-response psychology is about respondents. Stimulus-stimulus pairing is when you take an unconditioned stimulus, like a noise, a loud noise, and it gets paired with a neutral stimulus, such as the dark, then this pairing happens, and the darkness then becomes a conditioned stimulus, which now elicits the same response, except now that it's being set off by the dark, it's a conditioned response. It's typically about the same physiological response response repertoire, so to speak. So I'm frightened, I'm scared, but what it means is heart rate, chest muscles. So with respondent conditioning, we understand how people's feelings work, what they're triggered automatically. We understand that other environmental stimuli get paired with those, and we get a lot of stimulus generalization. The things that set that off can all be paired. And I give the story of a child that's been put to bed, he's sleeping, he wakes up in the night, when something falls over in the closet, it makes a noise. The noise is loud sound auditory, wakes him up. And if you're going to do this pairing on purpose, the most powerful way to pair a stimulus and make it be an elicitor, to elicit a reason, is to have the presence of this stimulus there when this natural one happens. So the noise is there when the child opens his eyes and wakes up. What he sees is darkness, the absence of light. So darkness in itself doesn't have any real properties. It's just you can't see. But when darkness gets paired with noises, a noise in the dark, well, the noise is what sets off your heart rate. But the darkness has been paired. So that child that wakes up to a loud noise feels his heart rate, that frightens him, and he doesn't understand it, so he cries. The parents come in the bedroom to no matter what happened, and he says, "There's a monster in my closet. He's trying to get out. He's trying to get me." And of course, because of all the stories we hear, whatever they've made up. So of course the parents turn on the lights, open the closet, turn the closet light on, and they say, "Oh look, this box fell over," and that box is what made the noise. So there was the original stimulus that set off the reflex of the heart rate. And that was it. But what happened was in this process of conditioning of stimulus-stimulus pairing, these two got paired, the child's body has now learned to respond to darkness. So the next night when the parents put him to bed and say good night, I love you, and turn the light off, all of a sudden his heart speeds up and he starts to cry, and they walk back in with, what's the matter? There was no noise, but this is how emotions get paired with neutral stimuli. The 3 o'clock in the morning phone call that wakes you up and startles you, put your heart rate up. There's the noise, the phone call. And quite often that information or call is maybe some family member is ill or died or something. Go ahead, your question. Comment? Question? Victoria, did you want to add something? Do you want to say something?
No, but I do have a test question that pertain to these key terms. If I don't know if I can read it and go over the answer.
You got it there. Let's talk about it. This is perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
So it says a loud sound elicits your eye to blink. This is unlearned behavior. The behavior of blinking your eye is specifically an unconditioned response, respondent behavior, reflex, or unconditioned stimulus.
Okay. Well, blinking is a behavior, so it can't be a stimulus. Blinking is something you do. Behavior is anything you do, and blinking is something you do. So in that case, and so it said, in the dark sets off a blink. Read that first sentence.
A loud sound elicits your eye to blink.
Okay, a loud noise. So a loud noise happens. So that would typically startle. When we're startled, sometimes our body flinches, our body jumps. So there's the body jumping. The eyes could blink, and the heart rate speeds up, and the chest muscles get tight. So it's not that this sets off always one and only one thing. It sets off physiological responses in the body. If that loud noise is made from something close by, there's also the vibrations of the sound, and the vibrations settle the body as well, which adds to the tension and the feelings. So if a loud noise is getting a blink, so that means I've got a noise that elicits and causes the body to blink. Like if you get something in your eye, you're going to blink. That's going to be a stimulus in the eye. Some kind of blockage in the nasal passage will elicit and cause a sneeze. The noise sets off the blink, and so we know we've got unconditional stimulus, unconditional response. These can be paired. In this example you're giving, it's got the noise makes a blink. That to me makes the blinking the unconditional response. What else is in that story? Finish that again for us to freshen it. The noise sets off a blink.
Says off the blink. This is unlearned behavior. The behavior of blinking your eye is specifically a blank.
Okay.
And then it gives the options for the answer.
Okay, do they give you the answer key?
Yeah, so unconditioned response, respondent behavior, reflex, and then conditioned stimulus.
Okay, so unconditioned behavior, the respondent. Okay, this is a good point, because this is where the question gets hard, because there's more than one correct answer. So the options are unconditioned response,
respondent behavior, reflex, and unconditioned stimulus.
reflex. Okay, now.
And the last sentence is the behavior of blinking your eye is specifically a and then ask for the answer.
Okay, so they gave us the story, and this is where up front they tell us a loud noise and you blinked. So there's the stimulus, there's the response. Okay, now they tell us, then they're going to pin it down to, if they said, what was the stimulus that made the person blink? It was an auditory stimulus, sound. It was auditory stimulus, sound was noise. So then the response was the blinking to that. So these two make up a reflex. So if you say a reflex, well, a reflex has two pieces. The reflex has to be a stimulus and a response. So this is part of a reflex, but it's not the response alone is not the reflex. A reflex has to have these two components. The concept of reflex has the construct of stimuli and response, and that stimuli and response can be unconditioned stimulus and unconditioned response, or a conditioned stimulus can set up a conditioned response. And this is a reflex as well. This is why the emotions that we feel to things that we've learned, when someone says something about that just makes me sad, well, something about the color of the shirt or the setting or the building or the church, something happened in that church. They sang a great song, and the choir sounded beautiful, and everybody sang along. Everybody just felt all the auditory singing and the sound. The harmony is so beautiful, it just felt great. Feelings are always about feeling bad. We feel happy, we feel sad, we feel joyous, we feel miserable. So in that environment, in that church, everybody's singing and the happy song, and the words were so powerful. that all became part of it. Now the church and even the organ and those other things in the setting have the ability to make you walk in that building, even though it's empty, nobody's sitting, and you're feeling some of those same feelings because of the conditioning process. Those other stimuli that were there during the actual singing have become conditioned stimuli. They're stimulus generalization, and those all set off the same good feeling you had. With this example, there was a noise and you blink, so that's the reflex. Reflex has two. This is why reflex, it's half a reflex, but it's not the correct answer. It's not reflex. It is a respondent behavior. A respondent behavior is a response. Response is a reflex. So this is a subcategory of this. It's not an operant, and it says it caused it, so it was a reflex. It was elicited. It wasn't any choice. It was unlearned. It's a natural reflex. That makes it an unconditioned reflex, unconditioned response. If it's now, this has been learned. This response is in the body as a response, but this particular response happens in response to this. So because of this conditioning, this is now a conditioned response. It's the same basic behavior. But in this case, it was happening without any learning. This is with the learning. This is the part of respondent conditioning, is that these stimuli, our body has learned to respond to these stimuli, the same as it did to the original stimuli, the unconditioned one. These have become conditioned. The response, same response, but it's a conditioned response here. Here, the blinking was not conditioned. That would be a natural body reflex to being startled to the loud noise. So that's why it's not a reflex. It's not an unconditioned stimulus because it's not the stimulus. Blinking is an actual behavior. So that's the one. That's the easy one to throw out. So then we get to the respondent behavior. It is respondent behavior. Respondent behavior doesn't happen. Lower respondent behavior happens as part of a reflex. Respondents are those physiological sensations. So the technical, the best answer, three of these are candidates. This we can eliminate because it's only half of it. But the technical term is an unconditioned response. Blinking is the unconditioned response. And now what do they give you for the answer? They say it was.
It is unconditioned response. I was just answering these questions. I kept going back and forth with unconditioned response and respondent behavior and that like fine detail of between the two.
Well, first, I'm delighted you're doing that because this is exactly the point of exam prep. And there's so many concepts. I mean, we can talk about them, define them, and get the constructs and definitions and kind of get it. But what makes it come to life is the actual real example. Then, since the bottom line is we're preparing for an exam, so all of these have to be in the context into which they're being incurred or tested. And the exam, of course, is an academic exercise to test your ability to discriminate concepts and discriminate between similar and different concepts and generalize all the basic behaviors. So when we have the question, the trick to this whole stuff we're doing for exam prep is anytime we can find exam questions related, we can dissect the question to see, based on what they said in that question, this could only be a UR. And because it is also a respondent behavior, so that's not wrong, but they tell you on the exam, anybody that's had the exam, it says, pick the best answer. And you say, well, the best answer, don't you pick the correct answer? Well, these are both correct, but this is the better answer. It's more specific. It beats by the definition of the concept and the construct, the definition of it. That's the second half of a reflex. So here's where you are going to run into test questions and realize, well, and typically you can throw two things out. So by knowing that a reflex has two pieces, you can throw that out. And knowing that since this is a behavior, it's not an unconditioned stimulus, you can throw that out. These are both correct. But what's the best answer is the one that's the most scientifically technical, the one that is the most specific to the field of the science of behavior. And we talk about respondents and operants. So as we learn all the terms and concepts that land in here, that we can, and by knowing each definition, how it works, how the stimulus response is an elicited behavior. The stimulus has eliciting properties and elicits a involuntary response from the body. So this is body learning. These are feelings. We give them emotional labels. And when you do, and while we don't use mentalistic labels to explain it, like I say, anxiety doesn't cause behavior. Anxiety is not an unconditioned stimulus. Anxiety is not an unconditioned response. Anxiety is not an A, B, C, or an MO. Anxiety is not a function. Anxiety is a psychological label for an emotional state. That emotional state is a behavior. So we have to take these terms and concepts we hear and we've grown up with in psychology courses and everyday language and just simply it is what it is. It's the same thing. Yes, of course, he's anxious, but we have to translate it into the science of behavior. We hear anxiety, we hear any emotional label, that's emotional behavior. We know that's physiologically related to the body. We know it's got set off and it got paired, and we take the story apart to see what are the components. And in that example, and this is my point, anytime we can bring questions like this, we can take it, dissect it, see where it fits in, and then realize here's the bottom line. When you're taking a test question, the most important skill besides knowing your stuff is dissecting that question. What are they actually asking me? And based on what they gave me and nothing more. Plenty of people who tested will tell you there's a tendency to add more to it. Well, if it was this, then it would be that. Well, it didn't say it was that. So this really is the bottom line when it comes to test taking is, what did they give me? What is the actual question? And on my course, I don't know if anybody here, I don't recognize any names on the list. Well, I think I do recognize someone on the list who's been through my Cal State classes. But I give examples of John was walking down the street. He walked past the house. A dog on the front porch barked. Now, in this case, the barking was a conditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. Then John was frightened and ran away. So the unconditioned stimulus, the unconditioned response, the conditioned stimulus, conditioned response. Well, the running away was not a reflex. He learned to run. He could have just dropped. So that wasn't a reflex. And this is asking about unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. So the barking was an auditory stimulus. So in that story, the dog barking was an unconditioned stimulus, and it set off frightened. Again, it says in the sentence he was frightened. So, okay, well, frightened is an emotion. So he had an emotional reaction. His heart rate sped up, and then he ran away as an operant. Now, I take that sort of scenario, I take that same question and give that, and then I say, in this example, the John being frightened was which? A, B. Then it was the same thing. So being frightened was the response. That meant his heart rate sped up. He felt his chest muscles tighten. I take that story and I put it where Mike was walking down the street past a doghouse, and a dog poked his head out and barked and scared him. So later, John walks by the doghouse, and his heart speeds up. In this case, what is the doghouse? Well, the doghouse had become the conditioned stimulus because the sound and the dog were in the doghouse, so the presence of the dog's barking made the original stimulus that set it off. It happened at the doghouse. He sees the doghouse, his heart speeds up. The doghouse became the conditioned stimulus. Usually he walked by the doghouse, there was no dog there, never got barked, never frightened him. One day the dog put his head out and barked. The bark scared him and made him feel frightened. The next day he walks by, you see the doghouse, his heart starts to speed, starts to feel frightened or scared. Well, that's respondent conditioning, and the doghouse has acquired the properties of the noise, of the auditory stimulus. And then I will take that same little scenario and I will test all four pieces. The doghouse is the unconditioned stimulus. The doghouse is the unconditioned response. Well, the doghouse is not a response, it's not a behavior. So that you throw that out. It's a conditioned stimulus, a conditioned response. Well, the doghouse can't be a conditioned response because it's not a behavior. So it's down to either unconditioned stimulus or conditioned stimulus. The doghouse by itself doesn't have the properties to set off a behavior. But because the doghouse was present, it was originally neutral, but the sound and the dog barking from the doghouse, the dog's face sticking out, even the dog's face became paired because it wasn't the face that scared him, it was the noise, the auditory noise. So some people see a dog and their heart speeds up. Somewhere in their learning history, a dog has barked or bitten them, and now the dog and the word dog, the stimulus generalization, someone says, don't go down this block, there's a mean dog there. And just the word dog can all of a sudden set your heart rate off because of the pairing. The dog, the sound of the barking, the biting would naturally set off pain or set off frightened. And then everything else paired with that, the dog, the type of dog, the appearance of the dog, the doghouse, those all get paired. And this explains so much of why we respond to all of these things with emotional feelings. And that's half of our field is we understand how reflexes are feelings, what sets them off naturally. A ton of conditioning happens all the time. I first started reading about autism in kids, and I read a story about the curious incident of the dog in the night. It's a story about a child with autism. There's other stories, and I would read about some child, and in this particular child, in this story, the color green just set him off. And I was trying to read, understand why would this child have an aversion to green? Why did green make him frightened, scared, or whatever? Well, it turns out, obviously, somewhere in the respondent conditioning model, somebody in a green shirt or somebody in a green house or a green car did something that caused that child to have emotional reactions. And green got paired very strongly as a conditioned stimulus that set off these emotional feelings. So a lot of times when our kids are having these emotional behaviors, we know something set it off as a reflex, but a lot of things in his environment have been paired. Whether it's the person that punished him for something, so they become part of an SP, the signals the likelihood of punishment, and whatever color clothes they were wearing, as well as the child then has this body, he's feeling something, he's feeling his respondents. We call them respondents. That's not a common label for thing, but it is the technical term. In this case, the more technical term broke it down to that piece. So back to my main point, practice questions are good. I do try to caution sometimes the questions aren't written sufficiently and they leave out something where you realize, well, wait, this doesn't tell me if he did it again. John's dad gave him $10 to mow the lawn. Was that a reinforcer? Well, I have to say he mowed the lawn again. If John mowed the lawn, Dad's gave him $10, was this a reinforcer? Story has to tell me he mowed the lawn again. If it said every week John mows the lawn for $10, Dad, the next time Dad gave him $10. Well, if he's already doing it and he keeps mowing it, then at least it maintains behavior. But the story, and this is what's hard about good questions, there's got to be everything you need for every concept and every piece of the concept, the must-have elements to work. In order to be a conditioned stimulus, it must have been paired with an unconditioned stimulus. It had to have been neutral and been paired to become a conditioned stimulus. To be a reinforcer, it had to follow. It had to be contingent. It had to maintain or make more behavior. And if you're a good test question writer, you realize you've got to put enough in the story to clearly convey to the reader, and you as the test taker, what do I know from this story? Is it ongoing behavior? If they state about it's ongoing, then I know there's some kind of reinforcement properties, some kind of reinforcement schedule. So is it a question about the schedule? Is it a question about the reinforcer? Is it a question about doing a behavior that no longer gets reinforced, and now we're talking extinction? Is it about the extinction burst? Now I'm back to the behavior versus the process of reinforcement, the process of extinction. So this is where knowing these terms, the concepts, knowing the constructs, how it's defined, and how it's defined within our field as a behavioral analytical term, behavioral analytic concept. So again, conceptual analysis of behavior is a big category. Experimental analysis of behavior is where we learn about the principles in the labs and the research, usually with non-humans. And then applied behavior analysis, which is using those principles and those concepts to explain how to change behavior applied to solving social situations, making social life better for the person. So someone who's become frightened or scared to the point of a phobia, and a phobia means it's basically it's dysfunctional. The phobia means it's now interfering with their typical functioning. So we read those stories and we realize, well, we know how to take that problem, analyze it, and we know how to teach progressive relaxation or desensitization with different strategies to help the person's body calm down, because all of these problem behaviors are related by an over-amped up body. This is why there's so much goes into de-escalation of emotional behaviors. Most of them, once they get set off, most of you just got to back up and let them run their course. A lot of times, if you catch it early in a stimulus response chain, you can redirect that, you can distract that behavior. There's things about kids that are stemming that there's some literature on 3 redirects close together to break that pattern. That's what it's going to take, because they're already doing it's got reinforcing properties. By the way, stemming is an operant learned behavior. It's not a respondent. This is voluntarily happening. So there's all this knowledge and technology of our field. And this is just the half of it that is reflexive. So this is that FK14 called reflexive relations. You remember that the bigger formula, I like to talk about all of this in terms of the biggest formula for all of that. Behavior is a function of the environment. So when we're talking about behavior, we are going to talk about where's it come from? What is the locus of control? What set that behavior off? With respondents, it was a stimulus. It was an unconditioned stimulus. It was unlearned, it's involuntary, and that stimulus elicits responses. And we start there as the locus of control. With the operant behavior, if I'm sitting in my house and the sun goes down and it gets cold, and I'm feeling the cold air, then I'm feeling this from the air getting colder, but I've learned to go get a sweater. With the sweater, I get up and I turn on the furnace. So that was not a reflex. Well, my reflex made my body cold. That motivated me to look for a sweater or look for the furnace thermostat. That was an operant behavior. So one of the motivating operations over here of my behavior altering stimuli was that it got cold. This happens in my house at night. It gets cold. I get chilly. My first thing I do is I pull my blinds down to block some cold air out. So this motivates me to respond to the SD In my case here in this room, the SD is my blinds. I pull my blinds down to start to block out the cold. Then I have a little special space heater on the floor, and just push that button. That's the SD. If I push to that, I can get reinforced by putting warm air in, that I'm not cold anymore. So the motoring operation was a UMO. It was a respondent and cold by the cold air, the natural cold air. So the locus of control was the environment. In this case, now once I'm cold, just turning the fan, closing the blinds, putting on a sweater, and turning on the little space heater, were with the conditions of feeling cold motivated me to respond to the SDs. So that was the blinds, it was the sweater, it was the space heater. So these were all SDs, and I've learned in the past if I respond to these SDs with certain responses, pull down the curtain, put on the sweater, push the button, each of those responses then produces, it's adding warmth. So when I say I'm adding warmth, I'm talking about positive reinforcement. If I say I'm removing the cold, well, then I could call, if this question is written about no longer being cold, then I've removed the cold. It was negative reinforcement. So which is it? Well, it's both. It's positive reinforcement by adding some warm air, and it's also negative reinforcement because I'm no longer cold. This is why this question is so challenging. Based on how it's worded, they're going to tell you either in the end something got added, got access to a person, place, or thing, or something in the end got removed, and that got access, away from escape or avoid a person, place, or thing. And that right there, access, positive reinforcement, escape, avoid, get away from negative reinforcement. They're both going on most all the time. The challenge on a test is to see what did they tell me in the story, which pieces can I find, how did they word it, and based on that wording and based on this conceptual analysis of how these all work, then the answer jumps out at you. You get down to two. One is the better technical term. One is the better science of behavior term. So respondent conditioning is the process, sometimes called classical conditioning, but the better term, science term, is respondent conditioning. Sometimes called Pavlovian conditioning, the same thing, but the better term is respondent conditioning. Respondent conditioning is based on the concept of reflexes, FK14, reflexive relationship of behavior and environment. What you do then is the operant, and these SDs are environments, the function of responding to those environmental stimuli. The MOs and SDs are behavior altering. They alter the behavior I do more or less. Once I get warm enough, and I turn off the heater, and then the consequences of the function altering. So I do this. The SD gives me the option to do what I've learned it. Then when the consequence changes it, and so the consequence is either reinforced to do the more of the behavior, or I stop doing the behavior, stop being reinforced, or be punished by the consequences. So the bigger picture is the behavior altering, and MOs and SDs are in the antecedent category. We have our behavior category. I'm not going to have room here, and then we have let me come back, try to tie this together now. So this coming off of reflexive respondents and unconditional responses. We have a respondent model. We see the basics, the terms, the concepts. We define them. We see the examples. We take the test questions. We analyze it. We systematically eliminate the options. And that's what we're shooting for in exam prep. So practice and test is exactly the right way to do it. Bringing examples and sharing is great. And if we have the answer the author gave it, whoever wrote the question, we have their answer, then we know at least we're using what they gave us, and we're able to use the reasoning and make sense of it. What you find sometimes is questions in practice test that just aren't very good because they're missing certain must-have elements. And I tell people, be careful with practice tests. They're always good to practice because your conclusion may simply be, this question doesn't have information. The author's thinking of something, they left it out. And I used to have people write questions and submit them, but we found out that most of the time there was too much missing from the question. So I've been focusing more on the conceptual formation of the concept and its construct, and how we test the elements of the construct, the must-have pieces, like reinforcement, or in this case, reflex. Okay, did I cover enough of that and maybe then some?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up, because again, this is a perfect way to take and show how that works. That let me start to introduce the MOs and the MOs and the UMOs at least, tied to these, that the UMOs are basically respondent conditions. Too hot, too cold, I'm bored, I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I'm in pain. Those are all natural feelings, responses to the environment that are respondents. And when we get to the CMOR, that's basically dealing with respondents. It's reflexive. It has to do with the feeling good or feeling bad, the condition is changing. We'll get to that later. So anybody else have any comments or questions on reflexes, respondents, any of the terms or concepts here? Any examples to share, anything else that goes in there? Okay. So this is part of what I tell people. When you're reading an exam scenario, you're going to read it and you're trying to figure, okay, I'm going to do behavior analysis. I'm going to look for the behavior in this scenario. Is it something being measured? It's measurement that I measure and operate. We rarely are measuring. We measure the number of tantrums, but we're not going to measure the number of goosebumps necessarily, or the number of hunger pains. But I'm looking to see, is this an operant or respondent behavior? If it's a respondent behavior, then I'm going to go through these terms and try to see how do these happen in this scenario, and then can I see which are they asking me about? The doghouse was a stimulus. Being frightened from seeing the doghouse, frightened was the response. The bark was a stimulus, but it was unconditioned. And then feeling frightened was the response. And so we've got stimulus-response psychology, we've got stimulus-stimulus pairing. And those are pretty much all in the category of respondent terms. Okay, I'm going to take back some space here. Erase these. Okay. Does anybody have anything else to throw out there that's anywhere related to what we talked about so far? Okay. I'm looking for the person who sent a bunch of these terms in, and I'm sort of waiting for that person to show up so they can get the benefit of the discussion, because I know they have questions, and if they can guide some of what their questions are, if they have any examples I'll test, it'll make it even easier to dissect those. So what else can I touch on for the moment? Okay. I'm going to use this moment while I'm waiting to see if they log on. I see 1 or 2 people logged on, so welcome. And if you have comments, questions, or concepts, share those and we'll add those to the list. I want to go ahead and talk about MOs and SDs. I was going to use this blue marker to make a specific point, but I think what I'll do is that now here's the response, here's a stimulus, here's a response, marking on the board. Here's the absence of the consequence, so the preferred reinforcing consequence is to have visible letters. Since this is obviously tried, that changes my intended behavior, so I'm going to cap it, throw it away. It's no longer an SD. Now it's trash. Okay, so let's talk a moment about, I want to come back over here and talk about operants. I want to add a little bit before I get to, I want to go to MOs and SDs. Now, again, my overarching, the launching point for the field, for the study, this is when I first started to figure out that it all went together, was behavior as a function of the environment. Since you're learning the entire task list, then as we try to build this, and I talk about trying to build some kind of study model, something to let you get a framework to take what you read, what you're studying, what you see in practice tests, and figure out where does it go in the bigger picture of how behavior works. So I can look at the terms and concepts. If it's antecedent, if it's an antecedent condition, I know certain terms are going to be candidates for the answer. If it's going to be behavior, it's going to look about operational definitions and measurement. And I'm going to have those measurement issues, those based on the dimensions of behavior, the 9 measures that we use. So what I want to do is take a moment, as I think I mentioned last time, I'm trying to build a new formula. And so what I've done is I've taken this basic piece here, and I'm adding the philosophical aspects, which is the FKs 1 through 9. And the idea is that everything is going to be grounded in science and behavior. So we know with the philosophy, we've got the FK01, the lawfulness of behavior. And just like natural science physics, we have laws of gravity. And of course, the natural sciences affect us, biological sciences affect our behavior, etc. So we got philosophical premises about behavior. And so we're talking operants and respondents. We're going to be looking at the idea that, remember, its law has some lawfulness related to the environment. It's got selection of FK2 selectionism. That behavior's been selected by the genetic makeup of our phylogeny, the phylogenetic development of the species. Well, whatever genetic programming we have, that's where we get our survival skills and our reflexes. And we also have sense receptors that, besides reflexively, we've learned we behave different ways, and that's where the operants come in. So then we've got FK3 is the selectionism. Then we get to the determinism, the philosophy that it happens for a reason. Well, now we know, quickly review, that respondents happen for a reason. A stimulus sets off a response. That's a reflex. With an operant, we know, like if I'm too cold in the room, then I've learned to change the environment. My behavior operates on and changes the environment. So if I had a stimulus environment where I was cold, just cold air, and I'm feeling cold, my response was to turn on the space heater, and the stimulus changed now as I've changed the room from being cold to being warm. So there's the determinism that it happened for a reason. The reason the room temperature changed was because of my behavior. That's where the term operant came from. And just in case you run into it, what we are calling operant conditioning, which is the other side of respondent conditioning, used to be called Skinnerian conditioning. And Skinner originally referred to as instrumental conditioning, but the more technical term is operant conditioning. So if you see Skinnerian conditioning, instrumental, and operant is a more term, but the other terms are in the field. Just like respondent conditioning is better than classical or Pavlovian. So I'm up to the determinism. It happens for a reason. Well, there was some motivating operation. In this case, the UMO, that I was cold. So there's an environmental stimulus condition. It motivated me to behave, and what I had to do then was, the motivating operation is this temporary condition of the air being cold, and so it evokes these these also, these are I use the SRS, but we typically know the ABCs. I just first learned that there was a stimulus environment, there was a setting event, a stimulus situation, you responded to it, and it changed the stimulus situation. Now we talk about, we have motivating operations and antecedent stimuli. That's behavior altering, and MOs and SDs evoke behavior. Okay, so now I saw something the other day that put it out this way, so I want to talk a moment about evoke, elicit, and emit. And the way they said it had me sort of reframe what I was thinking of. That their point was, all behavior is emitted. That as organisms, we emit behavior. So, and I tried to put it into what I knew about the model. I've talked about operants are emitted, and respondents are elicited. But as I saw what the argument the guy was making was that all behavior is emitted. So if I'm sweating, I'm emitting sweat, and that's my body producing sweat to cool off. And if I'm cold and I'm producing goosebumps, that's my body trying to warm up, and usually I start to shiver and shake to warm up. So those behaviors, to me, could be considered emitted, that all behaviors are emitted. And the distinction, since I now make a difference between the operants and the respondents are elicited, they're caused, they're provoked, they're involuntary, while the operants are learned and the operants are voluntary. So operant behaviors are evoked and respondents are elicited, and all behaviors are emitted. So we've got a behavior occurs, that's a behavior that occurred. Remember, that has the 3 dimensions. You need to be sure you know. It has repeatability, it has temporal extent and temporal locus. So temporal extent, it happens for some amount of time. Temporal locus happens at some point in time. So back to the locus of control, is the environment is setting off these behaviors. The operants are evoked, learned, voluntary. The respondents were reflected. These behaviors are emitted. We can put them in one of the 2 categories when we talk about the operants. Now I'm back to the MOs and SDs have the evocative effect. They evoke behavior. So if I'm cold, it evokes the behavior of looking for something that'll make me warm. So the UMO has evocative effect on behavior. So we talk about MOs, and I talk about behavior altering is going to evoke more behavior. And once I'm warm, I'm going to stop doing what made me warm, and that's going to abate. I'm going to stop doing that behavior. And when I'm cold, the reinforcing properties of the consequence are going to have, going to be that's going to be functional altering. I want to talk about it in terms of, well, I'll do that too. These are the antecedents are behavior altering. The consequences are function altering. So the consequences of behavior have reinforcing properties, and if I'm deprived of warm air and I'm cold, then that's going to increase the reinforcing value of warm air. So in this case, I've got behavior altering evoked, more behavior. Once I've done it, I stop doing it. It's evaded. If I'm hungry, it's going to evoke the behavior of looking for food and eating the food. As I fill up, I'm abating the behavior because now I'm full. I'm satiated. I was deprived, so I did the behavior to get the food. I'm full, so it's going to eating food abates the behavior of eating because I get full. And then as far as the reinforcement, the reinforcing stimulus is going to be established. So the establishing effect is deprivation of warmth establishes warmth as the reinforcer, makes it more of it, more reinforcing. Once I've gotten warm and I'm too warm, then it has the abolishing effect of the reinforcer, which makes it now less reinforcing. So when I talk about MOs, we're talking about these two main categories. It makes the reinforcer more, if I'm cold, it makes being warm more valuable, so it establishes the reinforcing consequences as more desirable, more effective. And once I've gotten warm, then it has the abolishing effect. Now, since I want to be more warm, it will evoke behavior of looking for and finding the SD. If I respond to the space heater, I can respond and get the reinforcement. With motivating operation, it doesn't make the warm air more available. What makes it available is the space heater. So this is basically unconditioned motivation operations. Motivation operations, that's basically I want something, and I'm motivated to do it. And the bigger picture of the ABCs, why do we do everything? Well, the function maintains it. Function maintains, reinforces, or decreases. But why do I want that reinforcer or not want that reinforcer is the whole point of motivation. And this is a whole field of psychology. And in our case, we put motivation over here as I'm deprived of something, most motivates me to want it. Once I'm no longer deprived, I'm not motivated, and the reinforcing properties aren't reinforcing, so that's going to make them less valuable. And since I'm now satiated, I'm going to stop that behavior. It abates the behavior. So in our four-term contingency, MOs makes me want it or not want it, and I'm going to respond to certain stimuli. If I'm getting too warm, I'm going to respond and turn the button off on the space heater. So I'm responding to that to add the warm air, and I'm also responding to that later when I'm satiated with warmth. Now that's the SD, in this case, the same button to stop it. And this lets me take MOs as motivating conditions by deprivation or satiation. This means this is a want, but this doesn't give me what I want. The difference between the MO and the SD is if I respond in the presence of the SD because of my reinforcement history of under these conditions, I respond and I get reinforced either positively by adding warm air, or I get reinforced negatively by stopping the warm air because now I'm too warm. But in the presence of an S delta, this response doesn't change. So reinforcement history for responding to this condition makes this pairing, makes the SD become it establishes stimulus control because now into the presence of this, I will do this behavior. And then now that I'm too warm, I'm motivated differently. I don't want the warm air. I don't want to have the heat blowing. So I'm going to stop doing it. And then I'm going to get negative reinforced, but I'm still discriminating on the conditions. Let me pause a minute here. Okay, so operant behavior, I was walking through the basic thing that happens for a reason. It's empirical because I can measure that. It's pragmatic because it works. If I'm cold and I turn the heat on, it works. I've solved the problem of being cold. That's pragmatic. Parsimony is the simplest explanation for why did he go turn the heater on, because he was cold. It's not okay. And then that's pragmatic. And then we get into the environmental versus mentalistic explanations. So rather than saying in my mind I was thinking, I'm cold, I want to turn the heater on. I don't need to use my mind. That's me thinking. It's me feeling cold, and it's me emitting a behavior that's evoked by these environmental conditions. Okay, so now we're down to the last couple FKs, and that's radical behaviorism is that it's all behavior, and methodological is that I can see and measure. So with radical, I can't measure the thinking, but I can measure the behavior of turning the space heater on or off. And that's the radical versus methodological. And then the last piece of it is those areas of conceptual analysis, how we talk about the concepts, inform the concepts, concept formation, the experimental analysis, what we've learned from the principles of research, applying those principles to solve it. And then in the end, the last of the FKs is service delivery, going into homes and schools, clinics, and communities, and helping solve operant respondent behavior problems for people using our technology. And let's apply these in. Comments, questions, observations on emit, elicit, evoke, and SDs, the difference between an MO and SD. Do you have any comments, observations, or points to make on those, or to reinforce, or to give examples? Everybody's okay with that? It's like, well, we know that. That's why we took the classes, and this is just a quick review. Okay. I'm going to take that back out. A little technical issue here. Okay, I'll take a MO versus SD for the moment. They got emit. Okay. Let's see. I'm still looking for the missing person who submitted these. I'm going to give her a little more time to see if she shows up, because I know whatever questions she has will help me drill more specifically what she's asking. We can run over those briefly, but I want to try to cover what I can with the rest of the group. We're talking about stimulus class, so let me try to talk to the, I want to hit differential reinforcement. I want to hit stimulus class. And we'll see about putting in context feature, stimulus feature, arbitrary and feature, and then this formal, functional, and temporal. Again, I got to pick those up. I'm not used to seeing those. As much as I think I know and pretend I know, I've got to the point in my life after 40 years I realize there's still more that I don't know than what I do know. So that's why I keep my Cooper book so close. Okay, let's talk about differential reinforcement, then we'll get to stimuli features. So differential reinforcement. The concept of differential reinforcement is obviously involving two behavioral processes. We're talking about natural process of extinction, the natural process of reinforcement. And so we see these happen naturally in the environment. We see behaviors that were reinforced fade when they're not reinforced anymore. If animals animals in the wild go to some fruit-bearing tree and they eat the fruit when it drops off on the ground, or they reach up and get the fruit from the tree, then they're going to get reinforced for going to that tree or that bush, edible items there. And when that tree stops producing, the season changes and that tree stops producing, then going there doesn't get reinforced with food, so that behavior is going to thin down, and eventually they're going to stop going to that tree, because everything is always changing. Spring will come around, the tree will blossom, and it'll make more fruit. So we see natural reinforcement for responding to the stimulus tree, looking to see the flowers that turn into the foods, and then getting the food reinforcer, and then that goes away. We see the natural cycle. So now we take about those processes and put them into operant procedures, and we imitate the natural science of reinforcement extinction. We use differential reinforcement. So if we want more behavior, we're going to reinforce. So it's very simple. If you want more, you're going to use some kind of reinforcement. The key I want to make distinction with differential reinforcement is that the target behavior is too strong. We actually want to weaken or decelerate that target behavior. So we're going to reinforce behavior in the organism, responses, response classes, the repertoires of the organism differentially. We're going to pick the target behavior that's targeted for reduction. So we want a deceleration technique. We want to reduce the frequency in some way, shape, or form, one of our measurable dimensions, of that target behavior. If we got tantrums and the child tantrums too much, so we say if he's tantruming too much and he's got a high frequency of tantruming, we want to decrease the number of tantrums. We also tantrums too long, so we want to decrease the duration of tantrums. So we run our functional behavior assessment to try to identify what's the reinforcer. If we find out that in this case it's attention, it could be to escape homework, escape going to bed. It could be to get access to the TV or a game, an iPad game or something. So we're going to take the target behavior, we're going to put it on extinction. That means we're going to no longer reinforce a previously reinforced behavior, textbook definition, and that is a deceleration. So we're going to reinforce. We have several options on how to use differential reinforcement. People tend to think, well, this is when I start reinforcing these things. But the driving point of it is we just want to reinforce other behaviors, reinforce them. The point is this problem behavior. Now I have a chance to use my red. If it didn't dry, we'll find out. So, okay. So what it is I've got a problem behavior. And it's a problem because it's happening too much, too long, too intense, some property. So my goal is to decelerate that. And my procedure is to stop reinforcing it. Once I can find the function, attention or access or avoidance, find the function, I can stop reinforcing that behavior. And while I know I'm going to get a burst, I'm going to get that extinction burst first, then we'll finally drop down. It'll pop up later, spontaneously recover. So, but the point is differential reinforcement is a deceleration technique because of the extinction component. If you run into questions on why is differential reinforcement a reduction procedure or deceleration technique, it's because of the extinction component, the absence of reinforcement. We know behavior will go, matching law says you're going to put behavior wherever you can get the best payoff for the least amount of effort. So any behavior is going to find a place to go. If you don't direct it somewhere, it'll find a place to go. And the reason we're brought in is because the problem behavior found a place to go that's the problem. For the client, for the parent, for the teacher, for the school, for the community, for society. People are in real trouble, go to jail so they can't do behavior, at least they can't do it in public. So the point of differential reinforcement, I'm going to use extinction, and now I have to pick how am I going to use the reinforcement component of it. So to run through the quick list, I can either decide that this problem is so bad that I will reinforce any other behavior that person does besides the problem behavior. If it's tantruming, I'll reinforce anything else. So DRO is take the target, make sure you don't reinforce it, and reinforce anything else. So I can build the strength of those other behaviors up so much this behavior stars for reinforcement. This is when it's so bad I'll take anything other than. They used to call it omission. If they don't do that behavior, I'll reinforce what they do. So it's either the omission of the response, which means it's some other behavior than the problem. And we get into what I could do is do differential reinforcement of an incompatible behavior. If I've got a child that's waving his hands and hollering at the teacher, I could only put his hands on the desk and hold them still and reinforce him for his hands on the desk. So if he's got his hands there or his hands in his pockets, it's incompatible. The topography is incompatible. Now, I still didn't solve the problem of wanting the teacher's attention, but if I can reinforce him enough for keeping his hands busy, holding something, hands in pockets, at least the problem behavior can happen. If he's grabbing people, that's an issue. That's an issue because that can become assault. So I'll reinforce the hands being busy, something incompatible. Now, what we know since behavior, all behavior is a function. If I can reinforce an alternative behavior that meets the function, I can identify, instead of waving your hand and hollering for attention, teacher, teacher, call on me, I'll tell you to raise your hand, hold it still. And it's appropriate to get the teacher's, it's okay to get the function of teacher attention, the consequence, but not for waving your hand and yelling. So I'll reinforce an alternative behavior, that until I get this. Now we get down to, it's okay to have some behavior. Now the child's learned to stop saying teacher, 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 raise his hand, hold it still. Teacher calls on him. Okay, put your hand down, she calls on him. And then he does it again. So initially she's got to reinforce him a lot for doing the replacement behavior till he gets in the repertoire. Then she can say, okay, you may ask only 5 questions in half an hour. So now what I've decided, it's okay for that behavior, but I want a lower rate of that behavior. So I'm going to set some number and not reinforce above and beyond that. So if he's doing it 20 times an hour, I may put it down to do 5 times an hour, whatever my time frame is. So DRL means I'm going to reinforce a lower rate of that behavior. Now, because I can live with it, I want him asking a few questions, but not so many. Other times we got a behavior that's a problem, and so what we want to do is diminish that behavior and basically thin down the schedule till it's down to just next to nothing. Typically, to me, this is trying to get it down to 0. So the difference between DRL and DRD is I'm going to diminish it by saying you may do it 10 times an hour, 8 times an hour, 6 times an hour, and I'm going to gradually change the criteria. And that's where changing criteria design comes in to target and show that this procedure is producing the consequence schedule of reinforcement for that, is thinning down that behavior, and I'm diminishing that down to my desired. If I just want a low level, I set that low level. If I want to diminish it, I want to gradually get it down to where I stop reinforcing it completely. If I stop all at once, I'll get an extinction burst and more problem behavior. So I can either set some level or I gradually try to shape it out, DRD. Okay, now sometimes what we do is we'll say, okay, I've got the problem behavior that's on extinction, and I want some other response classes to be occurring more. So I want to reinforce a higher rate of these other replacement behaviors rather than compatible alternative. I'm going to reinforce a higher rate of behaviors, but not the target behavior. So with the target is going to still be put on extinction, and I'm going to reinforce a higher rate, the opposite of my low rate. Sometimes you'll see, you might run into, depending on your text, DRP. Is anybody familiar with DRP, what that stands for, and how that works? Any guesses? Ever heard of it? This is progressive. I'm basically going to try to reinforce it a little bit more. I might set an upper lower limit and progressively raise the amount of behavior. So sort of like a subset of this would be a low rate down to nothing, a higher rate, and I'm raising it progressive. Basically, it's shaping some form of the response, the intensity, the frequency, the duration. Okay. So other, incompatible, alternative, low rate, high rate, diminishing, and progressive. Those are the basic DRs. And of course, this means we're talking about some kind of reinforcement schedule. Comments, questions on differential reinforcement or any of these variations? Questions, examples?
I don't have the exact example, but I was taking a practice quiz, and the 2 answers that were applicable to the question were either DRL and DRD.
Okay. So when
so I knew like the behavior had to have decreased.
Okay.
Or they wanted like a low rate of the behavior, but just like, again, fine tuning the difference between the 2 and what is the better answer.
If you run across that again, you're going to look at the question and see that someone does something, and the teacher, there's somewhere they're going to give you some criteria or tell them they want it less often. So if it sounds like in the story that they'll take some of it, then we know it was DRL, but if they want a lower rate of it. If they talk about getting rid of it, then we're talking about diminishing it to nothing. So there's where we have the wording of the question. We're looking to see, okay, what's this story? What's the problem? What behavior are we talking about? As we're talking about the definition of the behavior, the operational definition, we're talking about the measurement of the behavior. We're talking about making more of it, reinforcement, maintaining it, making less of it, are we reinforcing it, are we extinguishing, are we punishing it, are we maintaining it? What's up with this behavior? If they want this behavior to change, okay, we know about behavior change, particularly this operant stuff. Respondents is the other category. So if they're trying to make less behavior, they're going to want one of these. These are both, they're all reduction procedures. They're all deceleration techniques. They're all behavior reduction procedures because of the extension component. So the scenario will somewhere tell you the hint that I either want some of it, I'll take some of it, or I want to get rid of it. And that's what you're looking for in that scenario. So if you happen to run across that again between now and whenever, flag it, bring that back to us, and we'll try to take it down a little further. But does that give you...
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And again, I really appreciate this because this lets me try to tie it to the bigger picture. It's not schedule reinforcement. We've got, as far as the schedules of reinforcement, we've got the richest schedule, CRF, and we got the lowest schedule, extinction. And then all the schedules are all the way in between. So with respect to, let me clear up some more space here. So with respect to reinforcement, and we're going to touch on compound schedules. And reinforcement is basically, when you talk about schedules of reinforcement, we're talking about a rule that states when you will or will not reinforce behavior. On that continuum, continuous reinforcement says I will reinforce every single occurrence of the target behavior. And when I'm talking about extinction, of course, I've said I'm going to reinforce none of that target behavior. So that's where I can pick how much do I want, a little bit or a lot, how much will I take. And then there's all the way across here, so we have the simple intervals. And those are these, so now we'll get to the intermittent. And intermittent means I'll reinforce it not every time, but something other than every time. So now we're going to talk about, I'm either going to reinforce responses based on responses, or I'm going to do it based on time, on intervals. So if I'm doing it based on responses, I'm either going on a fixed number of responses or a variable number of responses, or I'm going to reinforce behavior based on a fixed amount of time or a varying amount of time. And those are the simple schedules. I'm still going to reinforce it either response-based or time-based. And it still requires a response to get reinforced. And for someone who are trying to extinguish something, we're reinforcing for the absence of that behavior with the differential reinforcement. That means if we're reinforcing the absence, it means the problem behavior is not occurring, but some other behavior is occurring. So it's either DRO or some other behavior. So it does still involve the absence of responding, which means whatever else is happening gets reinforced. So that gives us our basic simple schedules. And that's, again, response-based or time-based. And remember, the 3 dimensions of behavior. Behavior's repeatability, it occurs repeatedly. We can count it, measure it. That's event recording, frequency recording. Behavior happens for behavior. The 2nd dimension of behavior was temporal extent, so it happens for some amount of time. So there's where some time responding can come in. And behavior is the temporal locus that happens at some point in time. So interval schedules are about that point in time. This is about the occurrence in time at some frequency. And then we get it from this, we can make our simple schedules. Everybody by now should be getting familiar with and recognize that because of the lawful relations of behavior of KO1, behavior is a function of the environment. We know when we put these schedules in, we get patterns. We've learned that if I reinforce behavior every 5 responses on a fixed ratio schedule, I'm going to get about 5 responses. I reinforce, I'm going to have a little flat spot that we call the post-reinforcement pause. I'm going to get what is often called a step-like pattern by reinforcing every 5th response. The technical term for this is basically what as I've run into it is called break and run. I make a 5 response run and then take a break. And that part of that is to concern the reinforcement. This research came out of non-human research labs with animals, pigeons, rats, monkeys, etc. So they would respond, get the reinforcer, typically food, which was their initial research, and so they'd stop and consume the food. That's part of what makes the pause. And or if we reinforce on a variable ratio, that means we're going to reinforce randomly. It could be the 2nd, the 8th, the 10th, the 3rd, the 4th, the 12th, the 18th, and it's going to be, and there's not going to be a break because the organism keeps responding, because the more you respond, the quicker you get to the reinforcer. So that was our variable ratio. So there's the relationship between the timing of consequences in the environment affecting the behavior function to make a high sustained rate. Here it functions to make a break and run or a step-like pattern. Over here, if we put them on an FI schedule, we have initially very little responding at a rapid response rate towards the end of the interval. It's that first response at the end of that time interval. So here's time. And after some amount of time, it takes one response to get reinforced. Here, I was reinforcing either every fifth one or some random number, and then I reinforce it. I get that post-reinforcement pause. It takes off again, post-reinforcement pause. And then, of course, with my last simple schedule, the variable interval, because you don't know which response will be reinforced, you can't speed up and reinforce sooner. You're going to have intermittent 2 minutes, 8 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, 6 minutes. And so you get a steady, sustained rate of medium level behavior versus high rate. So there's our fixed interval, our variable interval. So those are the typical patterns. I've heard of test questions where they're going to either show you the graph or they're going to describe it. A fixed ratio schedule responding produces what pattern? They'll show you the graph, or they're going to expect you to be able to look at the descriptions and see like responding or break and run pattern, high rates of responding, a steady medium rates of responding, or a low initial responding with high rates toward the end of the interval, which is a hint that it's interval. So those are the simple schedules. Now we get to the hard stuff. We're not going to drill too deep tonight because I got to do more research, but I can at least introduce when we get to compound schedules. And I have to look this up again because I don't have these memorized. Does anybody consider themselves top-notch on compound schedules? I don't. I've still yet to figure out, short of bringing up a graphic and looking at it and finding good examples. All right, let me look for this. There we go. Okay. All right, I'm going to take a moment and go to my screen and bring these up. I have shared these before, and I don't remember if we looked at them last week or if it was the cycle before. I tend to do these exam prep sessions 4 times a year, and I stole these, I think, off of Pinterest or something. And it's a couple of graphics. I was basically, the story behind it is I was getting asked a lot about these compound schedules, and I never learned them very deeply. I couldn't even list them without some help. But what I saw with these was they had out the, whoops, okay, let me find it here. Let me get my mouse. Concurrent schedules, multiple schedules, mixed schedules, chain schedules, tandem, alternative, and conjunctive. And to me, that made no sense whatsoever. And then this other graphic from Rogue ABA, whoever they are, they put them out, and their graphic I like a little bit better. They talk about there are 7 compound schedules. So we have the simple schedules that involve either response-based or time-based, fixed or variable, and the 7 then are going to add more compounds to it. So they said they're talking about the way to categorize it was based on the response classes. So if I got more than one response class, if I'm talking about it's like a concurrent schedule, that means I've got one schedule of reinforcement for maybe doing the dishes, another schedule of reinforcement for watching a TV program, and so I'm doing some dishes during the commercial break. Then I run over to the other SD to the TV to watch my program for the next 8 to 12 minutes. Then I run back and I do the dishes some more. So there I've got 2 different response classes, and there maybe the SD of the TV. I hear the commercial go on. I'm watching, the commercial comes on, so that's my SD. I'm not going to be reinforced watching the commercial, so I run up to the kitchen and do for three minutes worth of commercials of dishes, and another response class. I hear the commercial go off. That's my SD to go back and watch part of my program. So concurrent meant these schedules are running at the same time, and 2 or more response classes. The point of a mixed schedule, they've compounded it by adding that it doesn't have a signal, but the responses are independent and they can be presented randomly. So that didn't really help me. But when I look at the idea of this mixed schedule over here, it talks about one response class, 2 or more schedules occurring independent successively, and typically we're talking about a time-based schedule, an interval schedule, and a response schedule. So I'm mixing those two properties of behavior: time, temporal relations of behavior, and response relations. So these schedules involve some combination of in this case, mixing 2 categories, responses and time. chain schedules here. They've got, okay, so there's chain schedules then talks about one response class. And that's to me the easiest one. The only one I feel like I have to understand is it's be 2 or more schedules, but they need to be done in sequence. So typically getting dressed follows a basic sequence. I think I've talked before, you don't always get the exact order. You can typically teach a child to get dressed. I work with families where the kid, first thing he wanted to put on was his shirt. And I just kept thinking somehow for proprietary reasons we should teach him to put his underwear on first, but he's home in his bedroom. He doesn't care what he puts on first. But I did want him to put the underwear on before the pants. And I wanted the socks before the shoes. Otherwise, I wasn't worried about the order. But there was simply a stimulus response chain. So a chain schedule can be 2 or more schedules, and I do them in order. If you're baking bread, apparently there's a very important order with this concept of letting the bread rise. I tried to make bread once, and I didn't really have the patience to wait for it to rise or whatever it does. And when you bake bread before it rises, I think if you've done that, you realize that doesn't work out right. It somehow just doesn't come out right. Tandem schedules talks about like a chain. So we'll go over here to the tandem schedules, and there can be, let's see, here we go. Okay, so the difference between, tandem. So I have to look at this. The tandem schedules are going to be like chain, but they can also be mixed. So they can have responses and time-based, and they can be in order, but there's no specific SD. So back over here it puts chained and tandem together and tries to distinguish. Here it can be an SD, here there's no SD, it's still one response class. And then alternative schedules has potentially SD, and again, just like chained and tandem seem to have some relationship here, the same with alternative and conjunctive. Now, I would have to find a bunch of practice questions, which I haven't found yet. And I don't know how much, I haven't heard anybody that I've talked to talk much about having run into these on a board exam. We should know these, just they basically came out of research with lab animals, but they're still schedules about the real world. If we look hard enough, we would find that we're always on some kind of reinforcement schedules. We're always multitasking. I'm sure we're doing a lot of these throughout a typical day, a typical week. But those are the 2 graphics that I can share with you. If I haven't sent them and you want those, I can send you those so you can study them. Maybe you'll be the one that puts it together, and then next time we meet, you'll explain it to me and the rest of it. So that's what I fall back on for the compound schedules. I'm going to close that screen now. Okay, now, does anybody in the group have or not have? Does anybody want me to send you those 2 graphics? I don't know if they're helpful to you. They haven't helped me crack the code, but that's all I can share at the moment. That's where I would list the compound schedules. Okay, so that's as far as going to schedules of reinforcement, the bigger picture, schedules of rules, every time, not at all, simple schedules and compound schedules. And of course, reinforcement is all ongoing behavior is on some form of schedule. That's about all I can share on that. Comments or questions? If you know more of any of that, feel free to share it with us. If not, we'll all just keep studying and learning. Okay, let's see what we can do with stimulus class. I'm going to save formal, functional, and temporal for the moment. These we can find in Cooper. All right, as I understand this without looking up, and this is again one of the years where I have to go back and look it up. As much as I think I know, I still got to go to Cooper. That there's some feature of the stimulus that is common. If I'm talking about a stimulus class of animals, I'm looking typically for some number of legs, 2 legs for maybe a chicken and 4 legs for dogs, cats, goats, and cows. So there's some feature that puts us in the same stimulus class, some physical feature. And then other stimulus classes are put together, but they're arbitrary. They don't have any common ground. They don't have the same look. So if I'm trying to take the concept class of, say, the concept of 4, I can represent 4 with 4 dots. I can represent 4 with the letters 4. There's the sound 4. Something else. There are a number of ways to represent the concept, and these are arbitrary, that this happens to be 4 dots. If I tell a cow, go get me 4 Legos off the table, and I'm trying to see if he gets a concept of 4, and I can see if he brings me 4 items. So I can illustrate 4, I can teach the spelling of the word, I can say the word 4. And so this makes a stimulus class the concept of 4, and these features that make up what that concept means can be arbitrary. They're not going to look the same, they're not going to have the same appearance, but they do all represent the concept. So they're still classed together with the concept of number. The other concept might be the concept of animal. Now let me stop. Comments, questions, ideas. Anybody who's read that or studied it, can you add something to that? Give us a more of your take on it, or raise more questions on it. And if you don't know it, then we got to keep reading and learning until we can talk about it more. But this at least will plant a few seeds, maybe.
For arbitrary, I think in Cooper it gives the example of like, it's like peanut butter, tofu, and like chicken are all part of the arbitrary like protein class, like of protein.
Like, yes. Okay, so we're talking about the concept of a stimulus of proteins, and here are things that are not going to look the same, but they all do have protein. So that means it's arbitrary as far as recognizing them, but you do learn that these have this concept of protein within this stimulus. Sound right, what you're saying?
Yeah, I just remember reading the example.
Okay, good. I'm going to have to brush up on all of this. But let me put that there for the moment. Any other comments or questions on that? Okay, now, formal, functional, temporal. Did you bring that up, Victoria?
Laura initially brought it up.
Okay. All right. Off the top, I don't know that I'd have to look in Cooper. Does anybody know more about those? I've got Cooper right here. I'm going to take a quick peek. But I'm going to have to talk to my reading assistant here and get a little help. All right, so let me just go to the glossary or the index for stimuli and see if I can find it in there. Okay, well, if we go to stimulus, then here we've got just a few terms to go through. Somewhere in there has to do with stimuli. Stimulus preference assessment, generalization gradient, generalization fading, equivalence discrimination, control stimulus class, antecedent. Okay, under stimulus class, page 27. Let's go see what that brings to mind. 27. Stimulus class refer to any group of stimuli sharing a predetermined set of common elements in one or more of these dimensions. So now we got to go to the dimensions. The environment. Okay, so under the category, and if you remember your FKs, we get to the FK10. It doesn't look like a K at all. Okay. FK10. I don't expect you to have these and know these numbers, but just when you see the term and concept, we know that this FK10 is behavior, by shortcut to BX, response, and response class. So under FK10, the foundational knowledge is what is behavior? Is anything you do? What are the dimensions of behavior? I've said it repeatedly now, repeatability, temporal extent, temporal locus. Because of those 3 dimensions of behavior, we can then look at all of our measurement, get the 9 measurements, the 5 measurable dimensions, the 2 derived, and the 2 definitional. Response is a single behavior, and response class is all those responses that result in the same function. So then we go to FK11. FK11 is environment, stimulus, and stimulus class. So when we look at what Cooper did with that, They took page 27, they gave us environment. Then over here is going to be stimulus class. So, and then we get to formal dimensions of stimuli, temporal locus of stimuli, consequence. The consequences are stimulus changes because of the behavior. So now I see stimulus features can be described formally by the physical features. Here it is. All right. So formally by their features. So formal is going to be the features. Then temporally, and that's going to be by time, temporal based by when they occur, and functionally. All right, well, there they are right there on page 27. And let's see, how many times have I taught chapter 2? I was just looking at the course syllabus that I got today. I'm going to be teaching a class in downtown San Diego for the next 14 weeks. And the assignments for this particular course, the basic principles, is chapters 1 and 2. So imagine my embarrassment for looking right here, and there they are. But the good thing is we found them. So functionally, it's then by their effects. So we know with our ABCs, we have antecedent stimuli that are behavior altering, and we have consequences that are function altering. So since consequences are stimulus changes, so then these common elements are going to be the formal, the feature of the stimulus is going to be how it looks. The temporal features is when it occurs. If it occurs before, that stimulus is an antecedent evoking stimulus. If it happens after, it's a function altering stimulus, and function then is this consequence functions to make more behaviors a reinforcer, or these stimuli make less behaviors punishers. And that just, to me, now it finally makes sense. Thank you for raising that, because there it was in Cooper. And now that I did all the other talking, it made sense to me, a little more sense to me. 10 minutes ago, I couldn't touch it. Never stopped learning, never stopped going to Cooper. Okay, does that add any to those? Formally by the features, we've got we just talked about the other two, the feature and the arbitrary. So the features are what's common, and the arbitrary is what's not going to have the same formal features, but it's going to have still the concept, because all these are concepts. Comments or questions on that? Comments, questions, examples? Okay.
CJ, I had a question on verbal operands.
Okay.
So there's an example in Cooper, page 535, number 23. It says you see 5 and you say 5. That is an intraverbal. Can you explain the reasoning?
523?
Yes.
Page 523. 520. Verbal behavior starts on 526.
Yeah,
535.
530.
Yeah, 535. Page 535, number 23.
Oh, there we go. 535. There we go. Okay, so here are verbal behavior classification exercises, and there's table 25.3, and you said number 23, seeing 5. So when I see 5, and this is see, and this is say, and I say 5. So this is a visual stimulus. This is an auditory response. See 5, say 5, and it says, oh, this is a test. This is A, and which one is it? Okay, so they don't give us a multiple choice. We're supposed to just know these, right? Hear book, sign book.
Yeah.
Hear book, say book. Hear book, say read. So, okay. Well, I don't have the answer key, But this, we need to come back to this. So I need to put
Intraverbal.
it's an intraverbal. So
That's what Cooper says.
So intraverbal.
Yeah.
There's the answer key right below it.
Uh-huh.
I can't blame it on being tired just because I'm tired, but okay. So it's an intraverbal. All right, so intraverbals are defined as within the subject zone. It's not a, because we talk about having conversations back and forth. We talk about tacting. Tact is information. So if I say 5, I'm naming, I'm labeling, I'm giving information of what that is. I'm defining a concept. I'm tacting the information of what that concept is. So, okay, intraverbal. There's the tact. There's a man. There's the request. Intraverbal, a type of verbal operant in which a speaker responds differently to the verbal behavior of others. Well, this bothers me right now because I consider intraverbal like a conversation. And they're saying that you see 5 and you say 5. That looks to me, off the top, I would have wanted to call that labeling. But they've got that as an intraverbal.
Mm-hmm. So confusing.
I can't say I don't agree because I can't claim I'm smarter than Jack Michael. But I can say I don't understand because to me that's tacting. And when I look at the definition, which is what I do, go to the definition, there it was, a type of verbal operant in which a speaker differentially responds to the verbal behavior of others. So, for example, saying the Buckeyes is a result of somebody else saying who won the game. So if I try to take that and try to make it work, then if I were to show the number 5 or 5 fingers and say to someone how many, and they said 5, then at least I presented a stimulus they responded to, but to me that still looks like tacting. But that's the stuff I didn't get that in grad school. We didn't have the chapter. I had almost nothing verbal behavior, but I can't make too many excuses because many years ago I had to teach that chapter. I just haven't read it for 10 years or 15 years. Okay, so I think my homework is I've got to try to work through that table, page 535, as an exercise. There are some folks who have had the training more recently than I have. My behavior analysis training was in the 70s up to roughly 75 to 85. And we have people in the company. Josh Olmstead is someone. Does anybody know Josh? He's up in Concord. And he started out as more Rogerian and almost anti-Skinnerian. But as he learned more and read more and began to look at behavior, all of a sudden it clicked on him that, it made sense after all. And he has basically, in his training, he became very, very good at verbal behavior. So 2 things. One, I need to contact Josh and ask him if I can get him to either sit in with us on a session and give us a more complete understanding of verbal behavior and maybe explain some of this as well.
I have another question on that one.
Yes, please.
Number 16 is, so the example is hearing color and saying red. To me, that's intraverbal, but the answers say that it's intraverbal or attacked. But according to the chart, in order to be attacked, the SD would have to be non-verbal, it would have to be non-verbal. So I don't get how it could possibly be attacked either.
Good point. Yeah, if someone, the hearing, which number did you say? 16. Okay. Someone said name a color, and you said red. That would seem like an intraverbal. Someone did something, responded to them. But now, if I said, what is this color? And someone heard me say the word color, and then I said red. Is that me labeling? But as you said, the definition was not.
That it had to be a nonverbal SD in order to be attacked.
Yeah, nonverbal SD. So, well, this is what makes our science so wonderful and so challenging. Is this looks like we've got contradictions all over, and I just admitted my naivete in verbal behavior. So I'm going to have to contact Josh, ask him to go through this page with me and help me understand that. And I don't think I know. Well, I might have been able to drop it. I used to do exam prep sessions with Josh and the Concord group. We always did them Monday mornings at 8:00 in the morning because his schedule, like everybody's, was pretty swamped. And I know he has a family, so he kind of likes to hang out with his family at night sometimes. Some guys are like that. My family says, good, Daddy, you go play. You go play with your toys. We'll watch a movie. Okay, well, so that's one that we'll all get to work on. This will have to be one of those. Everybody keeps studying, learning. And I mean, two things is one, of course, we should know all of this thoroughly as behavioral analysts. The other part is, at the moment, we're really focused on exam prep. So because the learning won't stop once you pass the exam, then you're really ready to start learning more and drilling down. But so I want to occasionally try to bring back to the idea of how would I handle this on an exam? How would I study the question? Because if we got some of this put in questions on the exam, we want to know how am I going to label that? If this exercise didn't really make it easy, how am I going to do it on the exam? And that means I've got to know more properties of these definitions. So that's going to have to go in the parking lot, which just means more homework. Okay. Stop there a minute. Comments or questions on anything so far? All right, well, what I've got left is measurement and the CMOs. So I'm going to touch on the CMOs briefly now, but I'm going to want to come back to that next week. The person who submitted those wasn't able to make it tonight, and I do want to get her questions to help me hit those harder, but let me at least touch on those for the moment. So we have this idea of motivation operations is why do we do it? And then why do we respond to STs? Because I'm deprived and I want that reinforcer. Why do I stop responding to STs? Because I'm satiated. I don't want the reinforcer. I don't do the behavior. And the UMOs are just naturally occurring physical human behaviors. The CMOs then, C simply means they're conditioned. So since so much of our behavior has been operantly conditioned, we've learned to respond to stimuli different by discrimination and stimulus control. We've learned to respond to them, and Jack Michael broke these into three categories. Jack Michael used to talk about, and this came up in 1950 in Keller and Schoenfield's book, they talked about what they call establishing operations. And that was around for decades. And in this, and as I was learning this in the 70s, we talked about settings and setting events. So if you went without eating food for a while, you're food deprived in that setting, and that event contributed to food deprivation, which made food more reinforcing and it evoked more behavior. That was an operation that established the properties of that motivation. That was in chapter 9. And then another, I don't think, it might be Cooper. Someone else just happens to by coincidence do a chapter 9 that's on motivation. I don't think it's Cooper. No, it's a different book. But the idea that Jack Michael said, and this is what was talked about, and so you were seeing EOs. And we talked about these as the MOs having the evocative effect, and they had the establishing effect and the abolishing effect. So establish and abolish effect, not the operation. So Jack Michael had written an article. He and his students did some research and said, this is better if we talk about these as motivating operations. So you're still going to see the two terms floating around in the field of what your takeaway is. What used to be called establishing operations, what happens is the reinforcer becomes established as more or less valuable. So established operations, EOs, are the same as MOs. MO is the newer term. And there are three articles that are not the same, they're in order that take this and develop this further by Jack Michael and his students. So EOs and MOs are the same thing. The word establish got moved to establishing effect or abolishing effect. So now we get to the conditioned MOs, and we have the CMO reflexive. And reflexive does point back to reflexive relations. And this talks about either a worsening condition, something getting worse, it's worsening, getting worse, or it can be improving. So it's either getting worse by the moment, or it's improving by the moment. And it's in terms of basically the CMOs are related to the concept of negative reinforcement. My example is if you're driving your car and the light comes on that makes a bing sound, and you look down at your gauge and you see the gas light, the low gas light came on. So maybe it flashed red or flashed some color and it made a sound. There were two stimuli, auditory and visual. And that stimulus was not an SD because you can't respond to that and get gas. But it motivates you to go find an SD, which is a gas station. So the part of this, what motivates you is that comes on and you realize I'm low on gas. If I run out of gas, it's going to be unpleasant. I've got to walk, I've got to call, I've got to get a tow truck, I've got to get the gas truck to come. So the CMO is a motivating operation, and you're going to do something because every mile you drive, you're going to get lower and lower on gas. You're going to get more and more panic and more emotional and feel more bad about it. It's getting worse by the mile. I hope I don't run out of gas. When you get to the gas station, you're pumping gas in. Now you're relieved. I got a full tank of gas. I'm good for another 300 miles. So the CMR points to the idea of some kind of negative reinforcement. I'm going to behave in a way to terminate this aversive feeling of being low on gas, and I'm going to be feeling better, and then basically go from escaping from being low on gas and maybe even fill up at a half tank next time or a quarter tank to avoid it. So reflexive is going to be tied to the idea of some relationship in the scenario you read about negative reinforcement. The CMOS is a surrogate. And to me, this is a surrogate stimuli, something else that can serve as the same basic function. So I get to the gas station, I'm driving along, I see the off-ramp, that's a SD and a stimulus response chain, take the off-ramp, I go to the Shell station, pull in the parking lot, pull up to the gas pump, pull up next to the pump. Those are all SDs that get me to the actual gas pump where I'm going to get the gas. So I go to get the gas and I have to buy it. And I reach in my wallet and I don't have any cash, so I can't pay for the gas. But I have another stimulus that will substitute for gas, for a credit card, and it's money. So that's where I have paired credit cards and money as the stimulus class that allow me to purchase items. In this case, I need fuel. So I see that as an example of a CMOS. I can still solve this situation with a substitute stimulus. And then the third one, more transitive, says I need something more. I need some other item. So I'm at the gas station because I was worried about running out. I've used my credit card to buy the gas. Now I need to get the fuel into the tank. So the additional stimulus that I need is I need that gas handle. So I can put it in, start the gas pump. I've got to take that handle, put that handle in the tank, and now I've got to squeeze it. That's the last response. When I squeeze the trigger on the gas thing, now it will transfer and I can get fuel into my car. So I can't just pull to the pump and get it. Now, if there's a station attendant, in the old days, they used to pump gas for you. So that would be the guy that helps take care of it. He's another person that provides, solves this. All the CMOs are all conditioned. I've learned to do all these things. These are not reflexes. These are not unconditioned, like being tired, hungry, cold, in pain, too hot, bored, overamped up. But these are learned, so they're all conditioned. And he's broken them down at this time into these three categories. One related to negative reinforcement, one related to finding another something in that same stimulus class that will still serve the function of in this case, a reinforcing stimuli. I can use the credit card to buy the gas. And I need transitive, I need some additional. If I want to get in the house, I need a key to open the door. If I want to start my car, I need a key to start the car. So that's a real fast nutshell of my current understanding of RS and T. Anybody familiar with those? Any comments or questions on those concepts?
What did you write next to where it says surrogate? Is that say stimuli?
Yeah, good. You read it.
Oh. Okay. I wasn't sure.
My writing is terrible, and it hasn't gotten any.
It's okay. I want to make sure I wrote down the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I write something so fast I look up and I don't recognize it. That's really embarrassing. I take notes and I look down and I read 3 or 4 words and I think I don't even know what that word is, and it's in context. But that's just more behavior. Okay, so
the same.
Yes, thank you. Good work. Yeah, because you'll. Oh, that's terrible. Here, let me get rid of the. I'm so embarrassed. All right, I'm going to stop there for tonight. We talk about measurement another time. So, any comments, closing, any takeaways, any overall thoughts as we wrap up? I know you're saying, can't wait to hit those books. I got so much more luck. I've been so much to learn. So, hang in there, go for it, keep working on it, make your list, either email it to me or show up, and if you got practice questions, and bring those with you, and we'll put more terms and concepts on it. We'll keep working our way through exam prep. I hope to start doing find some practice exams that we can start working through together in a couple weeks. So we can start and put them up on the screen, and we can talk about them together and start dissecting the questions and take it apart. Here's what makes it right. Here's what makes it wrong. Here's keywords. I've got some good examples of my own that I wrote, and I want to find some practice tests we can look at together. All right. Well, that'll cover what I've got for now. So I'll let us get on to the rest of our evenings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you next time. Thanks for coming.